Well, hello everyone. It's John Lockland here. I'm the director of Forum for Democracy International. I'm delighted to welcome my co-host Jeremy Nell from Cape Town and our main guest this week, Zoe Harcombe, Dr. Zoe Harcombe, a well-known nutritionist who joins us from England. I'm speaking to you from the Vendée in the west of France this week. Zoe, you are one of many dietitians. I think there are many of you who say that there is a narrative and you propose a counter narrative. What is the narrative that you detect in dietary and debates about diet and nutrition and obesity? And what is your criticism or hostility to that narrative?
Hostility. First of all, I need to say I'm not a dietitian. There are a couple of dietitians who challenge the narrative, but by and large, the dietitians present the narrative. So the narrative is basically that fat is bad,
Yes.
Carbs therefore are good. We should count our calories. We should eat low-fat produce. Plant foods are best. Animal foods are bad. And basically, all of that I would turn upside down and say the opposite of all of that is true. So that's the essence of the debate.
So fat doesn't make you fat, but carbs do. So by carbs, you mean bread, potatoes, and things like that. Is that it? Or that must be simplifying, because you've worked on this. I haven't given a very long introduction, but you've been doing this for 15 or 20 years. You've written 10 books. You've got a PhD in nutritional science. You know, you've got a lot to tell us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little joke that we have on our side of the debate, which is fat no more makes you fat than greens make you green. They do like you to eat your greens or whatever. So a starting point, which I think is really useful, is that there are only three things that we eat with calories. So that's carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Protein is in everything other than sucrose and oils. So nature has actually very helpfully provided us carb proteins or fat proteins. They're quite easy to remember as carb proteins are things that vegans would eat. So that's your grains, which is your bread and pasta and so on. That's your legumes, beans and pulses, fruits and vegetables. And then your fat proteins are the things that vegans wouldn't eat. So that's your meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. So those are kind of your two pathways. And the narrative will say very much you should be consuming carb proteins. And the counter narrative is very much you should be consuming animal proteins. And I approach it quite simply as, why do we eat? So we eat because there are certain nutrients that we must obtain for our health. And in fact, some of them we would die without. These are not optional things. They will affect everything from our energy to our eyesight to our health. They are utterly vital for us to live well. And there is an exact answer as to where the nutrients that we need are found and where are they found in the right form. And the short answer is the essential fats in the form that we need them are found in animal foods, especially oily fish. The essential proteins, complete proteins, the amino acids that we must obtain are found in animal foods. The plant proteins are incomplete. And then virtually all the vitamins and minerals, where they come in two forms, the animal form is the form in which we need it. So just one quick example, vitamin A comes in either the form of retinol, which is what you get from animal foods, carotene, which you get from plant foods. The body wants retinol. The plant lovers will tell you, well, the body can convert from carotene to retinol. It can, but not in all people. In fact, in a surprising number of people, it doesn't convert at all. So you really don't want to be relying on the body converting from the plant form to the animal form. Just eat what your body wants.
Yeah. So that's implying then that vegan diet is actually not good for your health at all.
Correct.
But hang on, I was going to jump in there, John, quickly and say, because I know that Zoe will get accused of being a shill for the meat industry or something like that. Zoe, are you paid by the meat industry?
I have never received a penny from the meat industry. I have spoken at farmer events because I'm a massive fan of farmers. If we don't have farmers, we don't have food. I don't charge. I've never charged for a talk. If I go to a conference, it's because I want to speak at that conference. I don't want anyone to be able to say, oh, you're only at this conference because you're getting paid to be here. I will go to the conference. I will pay to get to the conference. I've paid thousands on flights to get to conferences because I want to speak at a particular conference and meet other speakers, because that's how we network and learn about new ideas and new research in our field. No, I do not take money from the meat industry. I would not take money from the meat industry. I speak as I find. I just happen to say some things that they like, but I don't care whether they like them or not. I would say what I find anyway.
I guess the obvious question, sorry, John, but let me just quickly ask a macro question. But the obvious question is, why are we told to eat a particular way, and why are you saying it's wrong?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. And it goes back quite a long way, without getting into sort of deeper questions that we could get into of, are people actually trying to make us unhealthy? Because you could actually come to that conclusion. It's so upside down what we're told to eat. If I don't go into that kind of rabbit hole, but I just go back to when we introduced dietary guidelines, this was the core of my PhD. So my PhD basically said, we introduced the dietary fat guidelines in 1977 in the US, in 1983 in the UK, and we basically demonized fat. So we said you should have no more than 30% of your diet in the form of fat, no more than 10% of your diet in the form of saturated fat. And those then became the basis of the dietary guidelines. Now, when you know we only eat three things, which is why I started with that factoid, I'll give you another factoid. Protein tends to be, because it's in everything, it tends to be about 15% of any natural diet. And that actually holds for vegetarians as well as omnivores. You can immediately see that if you limit fat to no more than 30% of your calorie intake, if protein is about 15, then carbohydrates fill the rest, which is about 55%. So we told people to eat more carbohydrate without knowing that it was healthy. We didn't even know if it was safe, but purely because we demonized fat. Now, why did we demonize fat? There was some research that went on in the first part of the last century, where from Russian pathologists looking at cholesterol in bodies that they were doing autopsies on, up to Ansel Keys doing the 7 countries study in about the 1956 through to 1970. All the research was focused on this idea, and it was a hypothesis. It was an idea that fat somehow was responsible for heart disease. And every time I've gone back to look at the original research, and my PhD did this, what was the evidence to show that fat was implicated in heart disease? And there is none. There simply is none. The evidence is just not there. So we should not have demonized fat, and therefore we should not have been telling people to base their meals on starchy foods, which is still our current advice, despite the fact the evidence was never there and it's never been introduced since.
What do you mean by fat exactly?
Yeah, so if you say that there are three things that we eat, so carbohydrates, I can't remember all the chemical formulas, but basically your carbohydrates, so your to the body, carbohydrates are basically good for energy and not much else. Fat is basically compounds that have, so they've got a chain in the middle of, let me get it the right way around. So you've got oxygen, so you've got COOH at the end of a fat structure, and that would be the same for a saturated fat, a monounsaturated fat, a polyunsaturated fat. And then you've got a chain of carbon atoms in the middle, and they're holding hands with the hydrogen atoms. Now, if you've got a structure where all the carbon atoms have got a hydrogen on either side, you say that that structure is fully saturated. That would be a saturated fat. If you've got one area where you don't have those hydrogens at the end of the carbons holding hands, you would call that a monounsaturated fat. And you've got a couple or more areas where you've got some hydrogen atoms missing, you would call that a polyunsaturated fat. So they're chemical structures. We know them in food as the three things that I've said: saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. And here's another interesting factoid, because I love nutrition factoids. So dietitians will talk as if some foods contain saturated fat and some foods don't. So when I said earlier that protein is in every food other than sucrose and oils, fat is actually in everything other than sucrose. So it's only in things like lettuce and strawberries at an absolute trace level. You'd have to have something like a kilogram of strawberries before you could register the fat content, but you do actually have a trace of fat in virtually every food. Now, anywhere where you've got fat, you've got all three fats. So in strawberries, you've got saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fat. And then in cheese, you've got all of those three fats. You've just got them in different proportions. So dietitians will say, oh, you mustn't eat steak because it's full of saturated fat. Well, I'll let you ask another question in just 2 seconds. I love this. I put this slide up in conferences. Take a 100-gram steak. So you're talking percentages. It keeps the numbers easy. 100-gram steak, 71% of that is water. 21% of that is protein. There's about 1% of ash and minerals. 7% is fat. This is a typical steak on the United States Department of Agriculture database. And 2 of those 7 grams of fat are saturated fat. So you can actually say back to the dietitian, saturated fat is literally the last thing that steak is. You know, we have so many nutritional myths. You can drive a bus through dietary advice.
And in this category then of fats that we're not supposed to eat, but you're saying are in fact perfectly okay, if not indeed very good, you include what? You include presumably fatty meat, butter, cheese. What other things are we talking about? Not from a chemical point of view, but just what foods is it that you say we're discouraged? You're saying we're discouraged from eating meat. Is it particular kinds of meat? Are you including butter and dairy and so on? Are those the things, and eggs and so on? Those are the things you're talking about, is it?
Yeah. So we're actually discouraged from eating the most nutritious foods.
Yes, indeed.
So, and you've got those 3 fats in all foods. So basically my diet advice would be eat real food. We shouldn't need to call it real food. The stuff that's in the supermarket, they should need to call that fake food. So we know what real food is. Oranges grow on trees. Cartons of orange juice don't. Fish swim in the sea. Fish fingers don't. You know, it's not difficult. Come on, guys. You could teach a 7-year-old. So eat real food. And then the only debate is what should that real food be? And I come at it from what do we need and where do we find what we need? And then the answer comes out that real food should be largely animal foods. Meat, especially red, fish, especially oily, eggs, especially the yolk, and dairy, especially full fat. There's no point taking the fat out of dairy when that's where all the goodness is. And then the other side will say, no, you should shun all of those highly nutritious foods with the stuff that we need in the form that we need it. And you should base your meals on starchy foods. Well, that's how we fatten cattle. That's how we fatten chickens. You know, you go into a restaurant, corn-fed chicken. That's how they fattened the chicken. They gave it starchy foods. Why would it be any different in humans? That's how we fatten humans. That's why we've got an obesity epidemic 60, 70 years after giving this appalling dietary advice.
But I'm a little surprised that you say that we're encouraged to eat starchy foods.
Yes.
Well, how does that? What people don't say. The fashionable narrative doesn't say eat a lot of potatoes, eat a lot of bread, does it?
Oh, it does.
It does. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
go on the UK dietary advice. Look at, because dietary guidelines have been driven so much by what came out of the United States.
Yeah.
So when they put in place the first dietary guidelines for Americans, which was in 1980, which was on the back of the 1977 report that had been written about food, you had the American food pyramid, and at the bottom you had bread, potatoes, pasta, rice. It was a pyramid based on starchy foods. So if you go on the NHS website in the UK, if you look up what they call the Eat Well plate, I call it the Eat Badly plate, I think it might even be message number 1, base your meals on starchy foods.
Amazing.
Base your meals on beige foods, which are not nutritious, and the body just doesn't need them. They're also quite moreish. So you get to the point where you've had a nice steak and a green salad on the side and a glass of red wine, and you feel quite happy and quite full and quite satiated. People can eat pasta and bread, I was going to say till the cows come home, but they're not waiting for the cow to come home, are they? They're too busy eating the bread and the pasta.
And what about vegetables? What is the nutritional value of your greens? Eat up your greens.
They're not all that. They're just not all that. I mean, I'm not a carnivore by any means. I don't even follow a keto diet. I really do major on real food. I do know a lot of carnivores. I would go to a conference where I would be sat next to someone who's keto or a carnivore. And I must admit, I kind of look over at their plate and I think it just looks a little bit empty. You've got a nice plate there and you've got a big steak on it. And it usually is a big steak. It's not usually fish or something like that. And I kind of think it would just look a lot nicer if it had it had something else. I love a Greek salad, or I love vegetables. I love coloured vegetables.
Yeah, and it's boring.
Yeah, I think it is boring. I think vegetables are very tasty. Yes, they do provide some nutrition, but there is nothing that they provide that you couldn't get in animal foods. And if they are providing anything, so if the carrots are providing carotene, it's still not as good as the vitamin A that would be in liver. Let's say if you had liver on your plate or you had oily fish on your plate, you're going to be getting the vitamin A in the form that you need it. So yeah, they're not useless. There are definitely worse things that you could eat. But people who sort of think, oh, telling children you need to eat your greens or whatever, get them to eat their liver patty or their offal or their red meat or their oily fish. Much more important for their growth and development.
But
So I
Zoe,
was in the States in August, and I had the great honor and privilege of meeting an extremely famous American politician who is very interested in health issues. I'll leave you to guess which one it was. And he told us that his diet is meat. He, by the way, gave us a zebra sausage or zebra jerky, dried zebra meat in the sausage form. And so he eats meat and fermented vegetables.
Yeah. I think I know who that is.
Yeah. And what's your view on that then?
Yeah, no, there's definitely value in fermented food. So I have kefir daily. We've just started making our own.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite nutritionists is Natasha Campbell McBride. She's a Russian double PhD, phenomenally, awesomely bright woman. And I remember hearing her at a conference, 10, 15 years ago. And she was talking about the gut being the second brain of the body. So you've got everything being orchestrated from up here, but your gut is then the second brain. So if you find somebody who's not very healthy, one of the quickest ways to try to restore their overall body balance is to focus on the gut. So a friend of mine has just had a heart attack, and we're giving him some kefir to say, look, you really need to have some of this every morning because, he's been on antibiotics. He had a chest infection around the time of, the minute you take antibiotics, you want to be taking probiotics, which is what kefir is. Or you could get that sort of probiotic gut flora help from things like fermented vegetables. Pickles are great. Kombucha is a drink that people like to take, which is sort of repopulating your gut as well. My favorite just happens to be kefir. And the gut is getting, even if you eat well, it's getting an onslaught every day. What are we breathing in from the pollution around us, the stress that we're carrying on board? Just give the gut the best chance. Natural live yogurt is fantastic as well. It's got lactobacillus acidophilus, all these great cultures. Blue cheese. I mean, who doesn't love blue cheese? Just don't have the crackers with it or the bread with it. So yeah, RFK has got a very good diet.
You've given the game away now.
It's not a tricky game, that one.
But Zoe, one of the collateral or parallel talking points to keeping your fat intake down is because of cholesterol. And nobody wants high cholesterol because it's a death sentence.
Okay, there's two key points there. One, first of all, what has fat got to do with cholesterol? And two, why would your body be making cholesterol if it's a death sentence? So I see all over the place, people say saturated fat raises your cholesterol. And I go back and say, how? How does that happen? How does it happen? Let's say I drink some coconut oil, because that's the product on the planet that has the highest proportion of saturated fat of any food substance on the planet. So it's about 90% saturated fat. Of course, it's got the other two fats, as I explained earlier. It's got monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat, but it's 90% saturated fat. So I drink my coconut oil. I swig it down. It's going down through my digestive system. Now, carbohydrates start being digested in the mouth. The salivary enzymes will break down the carbohydrates, start digesting those. The stomach will digest protein, start breaking it down into amino acids, which is why the stomach needs to be so acidic. And then fat gets digested further on down the digestive system. At what point did that go into my arteries? Okay, so when people say fat clogs up your arteries, I say, well, yes. Are you eating your food or are you injecting it into your arterial system? Because that's the only way I know by which it could clog up your arteries.
But the other argument is then, but sugar does that.
So sugar will raise carbohydrates, because remember, all carbohydrates are essentially just sugar. So if you do the carbohydrates 101, they basically break down into sucrose, fructose, glucose, and galactose. So all carbohydrates just break down into sugars. So you're talking about eating any sugar. Yes, that does go into the bloodstream. So if you have one of those blood glucose monitors and you want to do it, super fun. You can get them on Amazon, start playing around with your health, little tiny pinprick, you'll get a result within 10 seconds. Take your blood glucose level, then have some grapes or have an apple or have a piece of cake or have a piece of bread, whatever you want, anything with carbohydrate in it, and watch what happens to your glucose over the next half an hour or whatever. So glucose does go into the bloodstream, but fats don't. Now, when you register fats in the blood, so some people will say, well, we kind of register a certain, like triglycerides we would find in the blood. And triglycerides are a much better marker of your carbohydrate intake than they are of your fat intake. That the body won't allow fat to be in the bloodstream. Yeah. So, put it this way, really quick example. So there's my water. If I took some olive oil and dropped it into that water, it wouldn't mix. The olive oil would just sit on top. The body cannot allow that to happen. So if you think of the water as blood and you think of the olive oil as any fat that might end up in the bloodstream, they wouldn't mix. So the body won't let that happen. So the body says, if we are going to transport fats around the bloodstream in any way, shape or form, we're going to transport them in little taxis. And we call those little taxis lipoproteins. So we'll transport them. The food that coconut oil that I ate actually goes through the lymphatic system, ends up being packaged onto a little taxi called a chylomicron, and that will then travel off around my bloodstream to deliver those vital nutrients to the cells that need them. You've got other lipoproteins, and you will have heard of some of these. You've got one called a low density lipoprotein, which they shorten to LDL. And you've got one called high density lipoprotein, which they shorten to HDL. And most doctors will tell you that LDL and HDL are cholesterol. They're not. They're taxis carrying cholesterol and triglycerides and protein and phospholipids.
So lower cholesterol is actually bad for you?
Well, I did some research on this back in 2010, and I was really quite surprised. And I had a couple of hours to kill one Saturday afternoon. And I thought, do you know what? I bet there's data, world data on cholesterol levels by country and heart disease incidence by country. And I'm only interested in mortality. You know, there's no point dying more of one thing and less of another. Overall mortality is what you should be interested in. And sure enough, on the World Health Organization website, there was some fantastic data on the average cholesterol levels for men and for women in 192 countries in the world. And then the deaths from any cause and the deaths from heart disease in all of those countries. So I just put it all into an Excel spreadsheet. I was as happy as a numbers nerd could be. And then you just draw the scatter plot. And I was stunned because I didn't know what I was going to find when I started doing this. That's what research should be. And there's an inverse relationship. So the higher the cholesterol, the lower the death rate. The lower the cholesterol, the higher the death rate. That held for men and women, all deaths and heart disease deaths. And some of those relationships, the strongest from memory, was women and heart disease. And it was achieving an R squared of something north of 0.5, which means it's explaining more than it's not explaining. There were some proper strong relationships in there when you do the Pearson correlation coefficients. Now, I'm not saying A causes B because that was an association study, but it's really difficult to claim that cholesterol causes deaths when the relationship for almost all the countries in the world is inverse. And I worked with Dr. Ufi Ravenscoff, Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, other people that you might have heard. That research that I did and I put on my website back in 2010, we got published in an academic journal. I think it was 2019, maybe 2020. So that is now part of the academic literature. So it's on the record that you've got an inverse association. And why our bodies, all three of us, our bodies are making cholesterol right now. Why would they do that if they're trying to kill us? You know, why would nature put all the nutrients that we need in red meat if red meat were trying to kill us? But doesn't make sense.
But we all know that the China study has proved you wrong.
So the China study, Colin Campbell, vegan. Okay, so you're coming from a bit of a point of bias to start with because you're going in with the agenda. If someone I respect has done a good dissection of a study I step back and I say, look, I'm really happy to direct people over to this piece of research. So Denise Minger, Minger, did the definitive response on the China study. So if you Google Denise Minger China study, she read the book, and she's like me, she's a real numbers nerd. She just gets down into a study. She can't let it go. She's like a little terrier. And she just did the most amazing job. I mean, there's at least one blog on it. And I think he then came back, and I think she went back to him. Almost all of it was just based on observational studies. Oh, we observe that people who consume brown rice and legumes and, kumquats, have better health outcomes than people who eat in burgers and milkshakes or whatever. Yeah, they probably do, but it wasn't the plant foods that made them healthy. You're comparing an entirely different person.
Well, so the reason why I brought that up, I was obviously being facetious, but I mean, I've been to Hong Kong and to the mainland, and I know that they have a very high sort of rice-based diet in general, and there aren't very many fat people there.
There weren't until they started adopting our diet. I've been to China as well, and the Far East and Japan and Hong Kong and all the rest of it. And where you get to the places that they've adopted more of the Western diet and they think there's nothing more esteemed than Coca-Cola and McDonald's, they followed the trajectory of the rest of the world population eating that kind of junk. So yes, people do come back and say, okay, there's a higher carbohydrate diet in places like China and places like India. If you go back to the principle of eat real food, and then we can have the debate of what that real food can be, I could easily have a debate saying, okay, if you've got a real food diet based on animals, that's great. If you've got a real food diet based on plants, that's also great. You're going to have to do some combining to get the optimal nutrients from those plant foods, but you probably do it naturally with certain dishes that you've got over in China. They also eat a lot of pork and chicken. That people kind of tend to overlook. And then Japan, they say, oh, it's loads of rice. Yeah, it's also a heck of a lot of raw fish. So they are getting the nutrients that they need from animal foods. This is by no means a vegan diet. Now, if you're eating a lot of the good stuff, you're not eating the junk, and you're also having an indigenous substance such as rice, you're going to be fine. And it probably is quite unadulterated rice. Rice probably is better than a lot of the other starchy foods that have come in the UK. So if I was going to eat starches in the UK, I would eat potatoes rather than bread, because a potato is a real food. It comes out of the ground. Just don't eat it 3 times a day and think you're going to be optimally healthy, because you're not.
But I mean, an argument that we always hear is, well, my grandparents ate, potatoes and meat and vegetables, and they would have a snack or whatever, and they didn't get fat. Back in the day.
Yeah, so they didn't eat fake food. We did not have fake food. I remember when the first low calorie drink came in, and I remember my mum bringing one home, and I was at school, and it was called 1 Cal or something. It was absolutely disgusting, completely unpalatable. So they didn't have all of that junk. They may have had cereal for breakfast. They quite often have porridge oats for breakfast. It was such a real food diet, it's not true. And they had things like tins of sardines or pilchards. So I was brought up on that kind of diet from the northeast of England. So I remember our weekly diet was incredibly regimented. So Sunday we had roast beef. And yes, we had Yorkshire pudding with it, and carrots and potatoes and whatever, but we had roast beef, which was where we got the nutrients from. Friday was fish. There was one day when we had liver and onions, because it was kind of passed down through generations that if you have liver once a week, you're going to get retinol in the form that you need it to the sufficiency of optimal health. Whether you like it or not, you're going to eat your liver and onions. So we had some really, really good foods in our diet. We did not snack. I mean, I would come in from school and I'd say I'm hungry, and it would be like, wait till your father gets home. Dinner is going to be on the table when your father gets home. We don't know what time that's going to be. Just go out and play and shut up and stop complaining. Or your mum might say, you can have some bread. You can have a couple of slices of bread or whatever with some butter on, and then wait till your dinner comes. But we weren't eating we just graze all day long. People just go on the tube, walk around the streets. People are stuffing a sausage roll in their face. They've got a bag of crisps in their hand. They're doing all this mindless eating. They're on the phone on the tube and then just sort of, munching like this. Never, ever, ever, ever put anything in your mouth when you're looking at a screen. Just don't do it. You won't register that you've eaten anything at all. That's how to really make it easy to overeat.
But Zoe, you've mentioned junk food. Sorry, you mentioned junk food quite rightly, and I love what you're saying. It's I'm lapping it up, if that's the right image. What is junk food, and what is the ingredient that makes people fat? If that's your view about it, how do you define junk food? I mean, I totally buy it. And by the way, I live in Paris, and but also have a country house in France, and the difference in terms of obesity between Paris, which is obviously one of the richest parts of Europe, and the country where we have a country house, which is probably one of the poorest, maybe not the poorest parts of Europe, but a lot poorer. You can see it in the waistlines. It's absolutely incredible. It's like two different countries. But anyway, go ahead, Zoe.
Yeah, no, that's a really good crowd. Getting good questions today. I'm enjoying these. So the easiest response to what is junk food or processed food is anything that's not real food. So that's the simplest answer. So you've got your meat, fish, eggs and dairy, and oranges grow on trees, and anything other than that is processed food. There was actually a team, I think it was led by a guy called Carlos Monteiro, Brazilian team, and they realized that we actually need a better definition of processed food. So they came up with something called the NOVA classification, N-O-V-A. If you go on my website and you put in NOVA in the search box, it will bring up the articles that I've done on processed food. And there's then been a study actually in France, the Nutrinet Santé team, who have been looking at processed food. And that's been really interesting because they've been using the NOVA classification. So the NOVA classification will be at a sort of level 1 of processing, you've done something to it. So it might be that you've juiced the fruit or something. And then at the next level, you've sort of added something else to it. So it might be, I can't remember all the different categories, but you get up to category 4 and it's basically as bad as you can think of. So if you went into a garage in the UK, picked up a sandwich, you will be able to count at least 50 ingredients. And I say at least 30 of those you wouldn't recognize. It would look like a chemistry set. It would be diglycerides of monosodium, whatever, maltodextrin, sovin. I mean, it's horrific. The main ingredients that you find in processed food will be starch of some kind. So it's usually sugar, actual just sucrose sugar, but it could be in a cracker. It could be sort of a white flour or something. So it's going to be some sort of flour, sugar, and vegetable oils, because they won't put in something like butter because it's just too expensive. So those real French biscuits that are just flour and butter, or a proper French croissant, which is just basically flour, sugar and butter, I would eat those because that's not a terribly overly processed food for me. But the biscuits that you get in the UK, you're back to the 50 ingredients, all the ones that you don't recognize. And they just make them completely addictive and moreish, very deliberately. Put one Pringle in your mouth, which is a particular brand of crisp in the UK that has many ingredients other than potatoes and oil and salt, which is all that it needs. You won't be able to stop. I don't start on crisp because I know I won't be able to stop. Why give myself that challenge? I know what's going to happen next. If I have one, I know I want 10. Why would I do that? Just like don't have any and then I don't want 10. It's really easy.
But Zoe, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
An apple is just sugar. Actually, it's water and sugar. It has a trace of protein because, as I told you earlier, every food has got protein in it. It also has a trace of fat. If you go in on a nutrition database and put in a kilogram of apples, it'll start showing up the fat content, which means it also contains saturated fat and all the other fats. But in essence, it's 90 something + % water, and then most of the rest is just going to be sugar. And in an apple, there will be some direct sucrose, but there will then be fructose and glucose. Sucrose is one molecule of glucose, one molecule of fructose, and your apple is going to probably have a little bit more fructose than glucose, but it's basically sugar in that kind of combination.
But it's a healthy sugar.
Well, how is it any different to any other sugar?
Well, it comes from a fruit, Zoe.
It comes from a tree.
So, okay, so to the body, so I get the white sugar bowl, okay, that's, in the cafe, or, those little sugar cubes in the French cafe. I get my cappuccino or my espresso, and I get those little white sugar cubes, and then I get them to bring me an apple on the side. And the white sugar cube is literally sucrose, one molecule of glucose, one molecule. So it's exactly 50-50 glucose, fructose. My apple, as I've said, is going to be a little bit higher in fructose, a little bit lower in glucose, but it's the same two molecules. So you eat the white sugar, you eat the slice of apple, the body breaks it down in the mouth. Remember, it registers carbohydrate, got my salivary enzymes. I'm going to start unpacking that straight away. There's not much protein to digest down in the stomach. And it's separating it out into the glucose and the fructose. Doesn't know where it came from. There's no message that goes down with it. Oh, that bit of sugar was from the apple. That bit was from the white sugar cube. It just says, right, incoming glucose and fructose. So glucose is going to go into the bloodstream, and the body is then going to need to get it out of the bloodstream because the body registers that as toxic environment, high blood glucose situation. If you keep doing that over a long period of time, we're going to end up diabetic. That's a bit troubling, which is why the body will just get rid of the glucose, and the fructose will head off to the liver, which is why not only do we have epidemics of obesity and diabetes, we have an epidemic of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because people think fruit is healthy and they think fake muesli bars sweetened with fructose are healthy. The fruit juice, the amount of fructose people are chucking in fruit juice on a daily basis. And the body, this is one of my favorite nutritional factoids. All of us right now should have about 1 teaspoon of glucose in our entire bloodstream. It doesn't matter what size we are, it should be about 4 grams of glucose, 4 to 5 in our entire bloodstreams. 1 teaspoon of sugar. Have that apple. Let's say it's got about 20 grams of carbohydrate, approximately 10 is going to be fructose, approximately 10 is going to be glucose. That's 10 grams of glucose that you've just chucked into the bloodstream. The body said, I was on 4. I was really happy on 4. I have this incredible mechanism. It's all run by the pancreas. And if it goes above 4, I release insulin and get it back to 4. And if it goes below 4, I call on glucagon to put some glucose back in there. But I'm on it. I'm keeping it at 4. And you've gone and eaten an apple and you've given me an extra 10 grams that I didn't need. I've now got to deal with that.
So are you saying fruit is largely unnecessary?
Yeah, it's completely unnecessary. None of us have any need for fruit. From now until the day that we die, we have zero need for fruit whatsoever. I'm not saying it's not nice. I love it. But we have zero need for it.
Apart from that last point, which I think a lot of people will find difficult to accept, surely it's difficult to swallow, hard to chew on, keep going. Surely the overall message, Zoe, your overall message, eat real food, I'm a bit surprised that you have the impression of fighting a narrative, because surely that is a very common narrative and has been for I don't know, 10 or 20 years. Eat real food, locally sourced, fresh produce, all the rest of it. Why do you think why do you feel that you're still fighting a mistaken narrative?
That is a really good question, because you would think it would be a strong narrative to say to people, look, just eat real food. But because real food is what you've just said, it's the locally sourced, it's come from the farmer, you must have spotted, because I know you guys talk about broader issues, there is a massive attack on the farmer at the moment. A friend of mine just yesterday was saying the farm next to a plot of land that he's familiar with, he walks on regularly with his dog, they want to go and put a ton of solar panels on there. So the farmer is so tempted to sell up his land because he's going to be offered more to put solar panels on it. There is an agenda to take away our ability to grow food. It's no other argument for it. It has to be an agenda. And I think it's all part of this bigger control agenda, which is that they want to be controlling us. Come on, if you haven't worked out that they're trying to control where you can drive, where you can go without paying £12.50 a day to Sadiq Khan or whatever, what you can do, when you're allowed to leave your house, what jabs you should have in the autumn and what tests you should stick up your nose and all the rest of it. If you haven't spotted that there's some sort of big control agenda going on. You've been asleep for the last 5 years. And the ultimate control would be to be able to control food and water. Well, food, water and energy, and look at also what they're doing to energy, our ability to be able to heat our homes and to keep warm and to move our vehicles around the country, which they don't want us to do. They would be really happy if we lived in these 15-minute cities. So on the one hand, it makes a huge amount of sense to say, eat the food that provides the nutrients that's going to make us healthy. And on the other hand, they really are saying, don't eat animal foods. Don't eat. I mean, the Eat Lancet planetary diet, which first came out in January 2019, was revised just last month. It came out on the 2nd of October 2025. I analysed it when it first came out. I analysed it again in October. It is catastrophically nutritionally deficient. And they have arranged the diet to say you can have up to 14 grams of meat. But ideally, you'll have 0. You can have 14 grams of fish. Tonight, get out your sort of postage stamp weighing scale and see if you can actually weigh 14 grams of meat. Clearly what they're saying is, you're allowed a 80-gram piece of meat once a week or something. It's bonkers what they're telling us at the moment. It's anti-health. It is anti-animal.
What I glean from listening to you, and it is, I repeat, fascinating, is that the locally sourced produce, fresh food, real food and so on, that is probably a minority narrative for people who can afford it. And you're suggesting that the reason why it's not pushed to a wider public is the things you've just said, the hostility to farming, the hostility to meat and so on, and there may even be an agenda behind that. But also, surely there's a problem, I'm sure you'll agree with me, with just the way people live. I mean, I mentioned France a minute ago. You may not know this, but French women have stopped cooking. They don't cook anymore, which is a very major civilizational development. But they don't cook. And obviously British women don't cook either. British men and women don't cook either. You mentioned the image of someone on the tube eating a packet of crisps or whatever. That surely is indeed the way people now live. They don't have your family, they don't have your roast beef and Yorkshire pudding on Sunday around the dining room table or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that unfortunate trend, family breakdown and urban life. In French, it's métro, boulot, dodo. So metro.
Yeah. I do know that. Yeah.
Metro is the underground, boulot is your job, and then dodo is going to sleep. That is, and what you're saying in your very interesting answer is that unfortunate civilizational decline, as I would see it, is also is as it were eased along, or at least approved, validated by this hostility to farming and to meat and to real food.
Yes, and of course there's the fake food industry alongside. So when the Senator McGovern committee came out in 1977 saying, oh, look, we need to go low fat, I don't think he had that sort of diagram in front of him thinking, oh, look, protein's about 15%, go low fat, we're saying go high carb. I just don't think people thought of that at the time. It was a bit of a penny drop moment for me. And of course, the fake food industry and the dairy industry were there and the meat industry would have been there, but you would have had Procter and Gamble and other Kraft or whatever other fake food organization. They'd be like, great, low fat. We can give you low fat muffins, low fat yogurt, low fat milk, low fat this, low fat that. An entire industry has exploded, and
all
then
of it processed, of course. Yes, exactly.
All of it processed. People, you have to sit down to eat the real food. My husband actually lived in Paris for 3 years, sort of before me, and he would say that sort of metro, boulot, dodo as well. He was very familiar with that. It's definitely a decline. It's not progress. We have not progressed as a species when we've moved away from the family dinner. In our household, and I know in a lot of friends, because I've got friends who like dinner parties and who share similar values. Every evening, I have breakfast with my hubby every morning. We have lunch together every evening. We sit down to dinner together. He's the cook in the house. I'm the sort of writer, so I would be writing. He's cooking right now. He's getting dinner ready. We'll have dinner at about 4:30 UK time, and then we have a natural overnight.
4:30.
Yeah. And then we have a natural overnight fast. So we're done dinner by 5:30.
That's very 18th century. That's how they used to eat in the 18th
Yeah.
century. Yeah.
But it's lovely. I'll be in bed because we had a late night last night. I'll be in bed at 8:30 tonight. I quite often up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. We're definitely early birds, but we always sit down at the table. And the families that we know, where even with the teenage children, it's like we sit down at the dinner table. You might have different meals because the younger child might want macaroni cheese. And the older, the boys, they're all into trying to bulk up. So they're like, Mum, just give me red meat and loads of eggs and protein. That's what they see it as. So they might have different foods, but they're all having real food and they're all sat at the table together, and there's no phones, there's no screens, and you talk to each other and you catch up on the day. We have lost so many wonderful attributes of being a civilization. We've become very uncivilized. I think it's very uncivilized to eat your dinner in front of your PC screen or with a tray on your lap watching some Netflix series. Honest to goodness, you will get to the end of your meal, you will not remember having had a single bite.
Zoe, we haven't really covered the most important part of this whole topic of diet. So John is in France. I live on a vineyard. Wine, alcohol.
And this because we've talked about this before. I don't drink, but my husband makes up for me.
See, that's the problem, though. We all want to enjoy life, but we know that alcohol is not very good for you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't drink because I don't like the taste. And there have been many times in my life when I wished I did like the taste, because I think it's a really nice thing to be able to share a bottle of wine with people. So we were at a dinner party last night. One of the guys there is a real wine connoisseur. He absolutely loves his wine. And he's talking to Andy about it and the vintage and where it came from. And Andy's tasting it and he's enjoying it. And it's just all going over my head. So I realize that I'm missing out on some of that. Now, there is an argument that alcohol is a toxin to the body. And people say, oh, I worry about the calories in alcohol. Don't worry about calories in alcohol because the body can't metabolize alcohol. It can't store it. It doesn't store any sort of alcohol calories. So alcohol comes into the body and the body says, there's a bit of a toxin. I'm not familiar with that. So it will then try to get rid of it. And it will use those calories preferentially because it's just trying to get it out of the body. So it will put a bit of a strain on your liver. But it has many, many other good attributes as well. And I don't rule out things like it's sociable. It's a relaxing thing to do. It's good for stress levels. If I'm working with a female, for example, who is really trying to lose weight, getting in, really tough job, getting in from a hard day at work, and the first thing she wants to do is open a glass of wine and just have a glass of wine while she's cooking something healthy. The overall, what she's doing is better than an alternative. Yeah. So come home, kick your shoes off, open that glass of wine, really enjoy it. Take time to just sit down and, process the day, cook your healthy meal, enjoy your healthy meal. If I say to her, look, no, you just got to get straight into having your oily fish and your green vegetables or whatever, she's still carrying that stress. She's feeling deprived. The body's going to deal with that alcohol. We're quite capable of dealing with toxins. We've got heavy metals in fish. We've got pollutants coming into us all the time. It will deal with it. If you then look at the academic evidence, as you know that I have done, you can put alcohol in the search box in my site. It is not as compelling as the anti-alcohol people would like you to believe. The units, 14 units for women, 21 units for men, that's complete nonsense. That's like 5 a day. It's just a number plucked out of the air. One of the guys, Richard, can't remember the surname, who worked on it, said we just plucked those numbers out of the air. So that's nonsense. If you look at the longevity curves, the worst place to be is actually a non-drinker. And that's even if they take out people who don't drink because they were formerly alcoholics. So that it's giving, whether it's the resveratrol, whether it's the antioxidants, something in the grapes, I don't know. But it is giving some kind of benefit. So I'd say if you enjoy, drink, go for wine, not beer, because that's too sugary. Enjoy your red wine. Don't overdo it. Don't binge drink. You're better off probably having a glass or two each night than you are not drinking during the week and then having 15 pints at the weekend. But no, it's not the baddie that some people make it out to be.
And coffee?
Love coffee, love coffee. Again, don't abuse it. But there's some people, the caffeine in coffee has no impact on them. So I think we've had this conversation as well, Jim, that
Yeah, it's a bit of a black hole.
some people can have an espresso at 10 o'clock at night and then go to sleep 20 minutes later. I can have one coffee in the morning, which is usually at about 5, latest 6 a.m. And then I don't have another coffee for the rest of the day. If I had one now, I wouldn't sleep tonight. I'd be wide awake.
No, but what I was kind of getting at is caffeine. Does it have any weight? Does it have any weight impact? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, no, that's an interesting one, actually. I mean, it is a stimulant. So caffeine will put the body, and you'll notice this, if you have caffeine and you don't abuse it, and you still have that bit where you have a cup of coffee and then you get that feel-good hit. You should get a sort of feel-good hit about 20 minutes later when you think, oh, right, okay, I'm ready for the day now. I could really sort of tackle some things. So it's given you a bit of a stimulus. If you have it on an empty stomach, it will probably stimulate glucagon to start putting some glucose back into the bloodstream. I think there was a book called the Oh My God diet, OMG diet or something. And caffeine was one of the things that it was trying to get people to use in a way to break down body fat. You have to be in very, very sort of specific circumstances. But it is a stimulus to the body. It is going to put the body a little bit into flight or fright mode. So you can use it to good effect, but don't overdo it, and then it starts working against you.
What are you working on at the moment, Zoe? I've seen your list of, it looks like at least 10 books. One of them on obesity, other cookery books you give people ideas, concrete ideas. Are you working on another book at the moment?
Yeah, no, not so much books. I think people just don't have time to read books anymore. So my main output is what I call a Monday note. I'm working on number 763 at the moment. So that's 15 years worth of Monday notes. I take Christmas week off, but every Monday, 10:30, a note goes out. And that basically dissects an academic paper. So it might have been dissecting the planetary diet, as I said, in October.
I saw that on your website.
Yeah. Somebody would send one in saying, oh, look, here's something saying eggs cause diabetes. It's like there is no conceivable mechanism by which eggs can cause diabetes. That just doesn't make sense. So okay,
your Monday note is essentially a scientific essay or article.
Yes. Yeah. And it's breaking down an article. It's saying, why is this headline wrong? Quite often I just find pure errors. And then I have to contact the authors and just say, and if it's an innocent error, they'll be very grateful. They'll say, oh, thank you very much, we'll correct that. If it's something where they've done something naughty, I mean, naughty is a better word than fraudulent, really, isn't it? Then they don't take quite so kindly to having something pointed out. There's the group that produce, one of the things I'm looking at right now, I'm probably going to be doing the next 3 or 4 notes on statin studies, because the original statin trials of this group of people took a statin and this group of people took a placebo, and this is what happened to cholesterol and this is what happened to heart disease incidents. There's some very, very dodgy science in there, and I've been meaning to really nail it down, and it's probably going to take about 4 notes to do it, and I'm deep into that at the moment. But in their most recent paper back in 2019, they did a big press launch. It's the Oxford bunch who do the big meta-analyses, which is sort of grouping lots of trials together. And they did this big press launch and they said, oh, if all the over 75s were on statins, we'd save, I think it was 8,000 lives a year. And I went into the paper, which was published in the Lancet, peer-reviewed, very esteemed, and I looked at the numerical data for longevity, for mortality and so on in the over 75s, and it wasn't what we call statistically significant. So it could have been a chance finding. It was not robust. And I wrote to the Lancet and they refused to publish my letter. So I put it out on my blog. But that kind of stuff goes on. Yeah, people will just openly.
I think it goes on a huge amount. I'm just rereading. It's a completely, or at least a largely unrelated issue. I'm just rereading Matthias Desmet's The Psychology of Totalitarianism. I don't know if you know the book, but he
I do.
starts off, it's a brilliant book. And in fact, I'm lecturing on it. So that's why I had to reread it, or have to reread it. And he starts, well, you'll remember this if you've read it, with a really pretty deep going attack on academic research generally, claiming that a huge percentage, 75, 80% of papers in all kinds of disciplines are wrong. They have mistakes. You use the word naughty. This is. I mean, he doesn't necessarily prove this. I think it's something he's worked on before. But of course, you mentioned the Lancet, Zoe. I mean, we all saw 5 years ago how the Lancet, suppressed the various things about EcoHealth Alliance and all that sort of stuff, and behaved in a completely outrageous way. So your work, that's absolutely fascinating. Your basic statistical work questioning the science, the so-called science, that's absolutely marvelous. That's marvelous what you're doing.
But you can also test it on yourself.
Sorry.
No, I was saying, but you can also even just test it on yourself. I mean, for the last few years, we have dramatically increased our protein and saturated fat intake, and we're not fat. So, I mean, I had 4 eggs this morning, which I fried in butter and layered with cheese, but nothing else. I didn't have bread or that. Or I'll have bacon and eggs, or coffee with cream, and you're good to go for most of the day on that kind of food.
Yeah. And yet, if you had porridge for breakfast, you'd be hungry by 11 a.m. You really can do it on yourself. I mean, I say to people, even just with milk, go and have your coffee shop coffee, takeaway or whatever. One day have it with the low-fat skinny milk, and the next day have it with proper milk, and notice when you get hungry. And the skinny milk, you're hungry a couple of hours earlier than you are having had the higher fat milk. You know, that the body wants fat. It fuels the brain. It keeps us going. Fat is the macronutrient. We call carbohydrate, proteins, and fats macronutrients, big nutrients. Fat is the most usable nutrient to the body. So the body will say, look, I can use that for repair. I can use it for development. I can use it for energy. Protein is pretty much for repair and building sort of things within the body. Carbohydrate is pretty much for energy. So you've got that sort of fat in the middle that's saying, I can do both. I can do both. So eat fat. I can use it to repair any damage that's going on in the body, keep you all super healthy, or I can use it for energy.
Sorry, just very quickly. I know that we are running out of time. Zoe, why do we eat carbohydrates? It's not. I mean, pasta is not found naturally. You have to make it. So I'm guessing at some point in human history, some people decided, let's put together some of these items. I'm not quite sure how it came about.
I'm not sure exactly when the sort of putting together the items came about, but I think you can probably take this back to the agricultural revolution, which you can blame on England. So that was what, the 1700s or so. And it was basically, we're talking about civilization earlier. This draws everything nicely together. It was our move away from the land. So up until that point, your local community would have the goats and the chickens, and some vegetables maybe, but stuff around the village, apple trees that would sustain that community. And the agricultural revolution and the machinery that came with it enabled us to do different things with fields. And they were doing things like the free field system. So they'd have the animals in one year and then the crops in the next year and then leave it fallow. You know, they were doing some really good things that we actually don't do now. But you can trace back the change in civilization to the agricultural revolution. You can also take back the world population to the agricultural revolution, because suddenly we were able to have larger families because we weren't having to just feed the people within our community. And that's a whole different debate that we could get into, because I'm not somebody who thinks the world is overpopulated. I'm somebody who is much more familiar with the birth gap issue, shall we say. But that's not what we're talking about. We've been talking about food for the last hour.
Well, the birth gap issue is also something that we're very interested in. It's something we haven't actually done a forum on yet, but perhaps we should, Germ. I think it would be a good subject. It's
Stephen Shaw, get the dude on, get the man himself.
Okay, yeah. I don't know him, but we'd be delighted. Thank you very much for the tip. So it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful talking to you. It's been such a pleasure. I'm definitely going to try and look up your books and follow your Monday Note. And
email me. I'll
and
send you something.
I
I'll send
will.
you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much, Zoe. And thank you very much, Jem, for co-hosting. And thank you to our viewers, and we'll see you again next week. All the best. Bye.